Good afternoon, everybody. Good. I love this crowd already. My name is Clarence Anthony, and I'm the CEO and CEO of the National League of Cities. Thank you. Welcome to the fourth annual Big Ideas for Cities event. This event was created, as I indicated, 4 years ago to really provide a platform for city leaders all over America to talk about a big idea that they are implementing or creating that will come up with solutions and make the communities in which they live better. But you know, first, I want to take a point of personal privilege and ask all of us to observe a moment of silence following the tragic shooting in Las Vegas last night, senseless. I know I speak for all of us when I say our hearts go out to the families, the community, the first responders, the city leaders. Too often this is happening in America right now. So I ask all of us to bow heads with a moment of silence. Thank you all so much. Tonight, this week, we're here to talk about inclusion in America's cities and the leadership needed from city leaders to bring our communities together. You know, right now we live in division and tension in many communities. And it's going to take city leaders like all of us that are in this room to help lead cities through this trying time. We see systematic racism and tension and distrust between the police community and people of colors. And it's leading to massive protest in places like Ferguson, St. Anthony, Minnesota, as well as Baltimore. Our economic divide is even wider, with growing income disparities and a lack of economic opportunity for those who really start at the bottom. And we are more politically divided than ever. Democrats and Republicans are constantly locked in partisan battles, resulting in nothing being accomplished. But it's amazing as city leaders, we don't care about Democratic or Republican. We often say that there is no Democratic or Republican potholes or Democratic or Republican problems. We just are elected to solve those problems. These are big challenges and need big ideas to solve them, however. And cities are not waiting for Washington for answers. Cities are leading because city leaders know that the buck stops with them. Our communities rely on us to get the job done and to make life better for all of us. That's what inclusive communities is all about. That's what inclusion is all about. We're here this week to talk about leadership for inclusion. How do we lead with inclusive values? How can we be more equitable? How can we learn from each other? I'm hopeful that each of you in this room will take what you hear this week back to your communities so that you can be noted as an inclusive leader, a leader who sees a greater vision for your community. We have more than 100 city leaders gathered here this week from all parts of America, who are committed to making their communities better. Over the next few days, you'll hear from the experts who are dedicated to helping us with solutions. But you know, more importantly, I hope that you will step out of your comfort zone and make sure that you share some ideas about what you're doing so that the leaders in this room will also go back home with ideas that actually have been implemented in communities. Your success and failures are important for real learning. The National League of Cities is your partner. Through leadership summits like this one, we're helping leaders on issues like becoming more resilient, making sure economic development is equitable, and undoing racism in city institutions and policies. But we can't do it alone. And we appreciate leaders all of America, again, being a part of resolving many of these challenges. I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsors here for this event. The U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance. It's a program that was a big idea that originated from cities and counties in California more than 25 years ago. That idea was to save local governments and taxpayers money by rethinking how they purchase things like technology, playground equipment, as well as safety equipment. With the power of cooperative purchasing, U.S. Communities is making sure local governments get the best price on critical purchases, including life-saving drugs like naloxone, which treats opioid overdose. Fast forward 2017, the U.S. Communities program, with the leadership of NLC, the National Association of Counties, U.S. Communities, the League of California Cities, and we have our executive director, Carolyn Coleman, here representing the League of California Cities, is making sure that taxpayers do get the best value for their investment. In fact, San Diego is number 5 on the list of top 10 cities who use U.S. Communities as a supplier. So again, I thank you for that sponsorship, U.S. Communities, and the League of California Cities and the City of San Diego for bringing us here today. So let me get it started. Our first speaker and our host city, I welcomed him to San Diego today. He gave me a weird look, but that's what most mayors do when you welcome them to their own city. We're honored to have Mayor Faulconer. He's been the mayor since 2014. One of his top priorities was to bring San Diego together. Throughout his administration, has focused on inclusive policies and expanding economic opportunity. It's one of those cities that is very diverse, and you can see it in the energy when you walk around. 29% Hispanic, 16% Asian, and 44% white. But it's also a city that people say it's a prosperous city because of that diversity. He's also been one of those who has focused on not just the median income households, but also the lower income. The Gini index, which measures income disparity, and when my staff wrote that note, I looked at them, the Gini index. If you don't learn anything else, I learned what this was. So write this down, G-I-N-I. The Gini index, which measures income disparity, shows the income gap in San Diego is lower than the national and state averages. And that's amazing for a city this size. Mayor Faulconer launched his One San Diego initiative in 2014, and so it has been very successful. So let me ask the mayor to come up and tell us about his big idea and some of the great things that are going on here in San Diego. Mayor.
Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. Welcome to San Diego. I'm glad you're here. Have you spent a lot of money yet? Is it too early? Oh, a few heads. Well, you're going to be here for how many days? You're going to be here? 4 days? 3 days? Well, you got lots of time. So I want you to have a great time. I'm glad you're here. And Clarence, thank you for that very nice introduction, and particularly on the Gini index. Now, G-I-N-I. I know that as well. Look, I wanted to make sure I came by not just to say welcome, and I'm glad you're all here, but give you just a couple of thoughts and comments on some of the things that we are working on here in San Diego. And as whether you're a mayor or a city council member, I think that all of us know, and it's something that I know all the time. We're only in these roles for a finite amount of time, right? Right, all of us. It's what we do with them. That's and the pace of just everything takes longer than we want, right? And so why conferences like this are so important is for us to talk with each other, get good ideas, but really it's about results. How do we cut through some of that, right, and get things going? Because I was on the city council for, I think, about 6 or 7 years, and then been fortunate to serve as mayor for 3.5 years. And I love what we're doing. I'm going to share some of those things, but I will tell you if there's one thing, it's move as quickly as you can, because it goes quick. And when you're working with council members, when you're working with everybody else, to be in a position that we are fortunate enough to be in and to drive that agenda is something that none of us take lightly, obviously, because we are here for a defined amount of time, and it's all about what are we doing while we're here. So when we're that quality of life and how we're driving that. I ran and have really tried to set the tone since I've been elected as mayor on One San Diego. And what I meant was our city can't truly be great unless every neighborhood is doing great. And we're delivering services to every neighborhood. And it's not about partisanship. It's not about whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. It's what's the right thing to do. Well, amen. Thank you very much. And when we focus on that, it doesn't matter. It's about results. And that is something that every chance I get, I like to stress, because when we do that, when we're creating those opportunities, when we're delivering results at the municipal level, that's what people want. That's what people expect. There's plenty of time for partisanship down the road. I will tell you, as somebody who, when I got elected, San Diego was once mired in a financial scandal, pension scandal, Enron by the Sea, as you may have remembered, not a moniker that any city would want. But now we're held up as a model of pension reforms and best financial practices, something I'm proud of, spent a lot of time on the council and what we've done since then. But I'm a big believer in challenges and what you do to change what could be perceived as a weakness into a strength, and hard work and tough decision making, which is what all of us are here in this room for, right? Today's conference, Inclusion, Public Safety, and Economic Development, I could spend probably an hour talking about each one of those, as I think probably all of us could do. But it's easy to say that your city is inclusive by passing well-meaning resolutions about this or that, right? But it's not just about words. It's about how do we invest in neighborhoods? How do we show those results? And that's something that I've made a key focus since I've been fortunate enough to be elected in this great city. I held my first swearing-in ceremony in southeastern San Diego when I was elected. Largely black and Latino neighborhood. It was a symbolic gesture, but that's where my campaign office was. That's where I said, this is where we're going to put our money where our mouth is and do the things that need to be investing that hadn't traditionally been done in San Diego. And with each budget, I have significantly, with the help of my colleagues on the council, put infrastructure investment nearly $500 million. And that's a bigger city than some, but that's what, again, back to showing results and by demonstrating inclusiveness, is a library that's open longer, a rec center that's open longer, which we've done with every library and every rec center across the city. Streets that are getting paved. And the fact that we're fixing our streets on a record pace with more than 600 miles that we've repaired in 2 years. It's actually about 604. I keep a daily tab because it's near and dear to my heart. But I will tell you, last year I was in I vividly remember this. I was talking to one of the pastors in southeastern San Diego, and the street in front of his church was recently paved. And he said, he'd been there for decades, and he couldn't remember the last time that street was paved. I said, well, Pastor, we're in the business of making changes. We're in the business of making sure that everybody's getting the services and the city dollars that they deserve. So when we talk about how do we make results in neighborhoods, all of us are in a very unique position to do that. And it means the world to our residents, right? It's not partisanship. But so as we've done all of the things that we've been doing to launch a lot of our programs, I've tried to do it in a manner that says, again, this is in the best interest of the city, not just for now, but how are we, right, all of us, how are we looking ahead? What's going to happen in our city, in our states 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? One of the things that we did, our landmark climate action plan that we passed, again, with bipartisan support here in San Diego, one of the most aggressive climate action plans in the country. I'm proud of that. And we did it by bringing environmental groups and business groups together, again, because you have enough people fighting on both sides of that issue, right? Let's try to actually have a plan that people can get behind, that has benchmarks that we can measure, and it's going to do the right thing. We're going to do 100% renewable energy by 2035. It is achievable if you stand in and work together. Good news is we're ahead of schedule on some of those. We're embarking on one of the most ambitious water recycling projects in North America right now, here in San Diego. It's our pure water program. It used to be called toilet to tap. Don't you think pure water sounds so much better? But when we talk about, some of you are here in California, I know some are from across the country. We're out of the last drought. We will have future droughts. How do we, as San Diegans, prepare for that sustainable future so we control our own destiny, at the same time doing the right thing by the environment? And when that project is built, we are going to create out of water that's going out of our treatment plant, a third of our water supply here locally in San Diego. It's not inexpensive. Part of my job as mayor, part of us is to go out there and tell folks, when we're going to invest, here's the benefits of doing that, right? And so never easy. But again, I'd like to think when you, as I said before, when you bring everybody together to the table, you have the opportunity to get things done. A couple things, because I'm only supposed to be here for 5 minutes. But I just spoke to a group, we had the autonomous vehicle groups that were in town. We're one of 10 in this country that's been by the U.S. Department of Transportation as an autonomous vehicle proving ground. Again, taking advantage of that unique collaboration of technology here, wireless, biotechnology, others that we have here in San Diego that I'm so proud of. So I've really tried to set that tone that let's use technology. Let's use not only what's good for our families right now, right this instance with our roads, our libraries, our rec centers, but what should we be doing in the future with infrastructure investment? And to do that about how government can do it, but do it better. And to be honest about that. And to be bringing people together about that so you get rid of some of the rhetoric and ideology and really focus on results. And I think that when you do that, when you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you disagree, you can usually come to some common solutions. At least that's what I've found working in government for a number of years now. So I'm excited that you're here in San Diego. I'm excited anytime you get good folks that want to come and say, what's happening in your city? What's happening in my city? Have those discussions. You got some great mayors that are going to be up here sharing some of their experiences and collaboration. That's how we make our city stronger, guys. That's how we make our nation stronger, when we get together and talk about doing the right thing and overcome those challenges. It's up to us to do it and to lead with our communities, and often leading with community first. That's something that all of us, I think, are very proud of. Clarence, I want to thank you for everybody for having us here today, the National League of Cities. Thanks for the great ideas. Thanks for the great discussions. And again, please spend as much money as you can here in San Diego. I'll be out keeping tabs on you to make sure that you're doing that. I'm glad you're here in San Diego, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for what you're doing. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Thank you, Clarence.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks again, Mayor. Really appreciate your leadership and support of the National League of Cities and the League of California Cities as well. I think Carolyn's second vice president is a council member. First vice president is a council member from San Diego, so that is great. All right. Is he here? I can't see him.
He's in the back of the room.
Oh, he's in the back of the room. Good to see you again, Mark, wherever you are. It's my pleasure today to moderate a panel of experts and mayors from the region. Amazing group of folks, and so I'm going to sit over here. I'm going to first ask Mayor Kirsten Keith of Menlo Park, California. Mayor, could you join us? How did I do on that name?
You're so good.
Oh, man, that's what I love to hear. Okay. We're also going to have Mayor Ken Rosenberg from Mountain View, California. Mayor Mary Salas, Chula Vista, California. And Mayor Michael Tubbs from Stockton, California. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here and hosting us in this great state of California. It's really good to be here and to hear from you about some of the things that's happening in your city and some of the big ideas, perhaps, that and challenges and opportunity that you're seeing in your cities. And I'm sure that all of the attendees at this conference is going to learn a lot from you all. So thank you. I'm going to start with you, Mayor Keith. First, tell us about Menlo Park, which is outside of San Francisco. What kind of challenges are you facing, and how can you use inclusive processes to solve any of those issues?
Well, thank you for asking, and it's a pleasure to be here, by the way, and with all of you as well. So thank you. My name's Kirsten Keith, as you heard, and I'm the mayor of Menlo Park. We are a community right next to my good friend Ken here, who's from Mountain View, and we're about 25 miles south of San Francisco. We're about 33,000 people, and something that we're well known for now is that Facebook headquarters are in Menlo Park, and they moved to Menlo Park in 2012. But Menlo Park is also unique in that we have Sand Hill Road, which has more venture capital funding than most places. I venture to say anywhere else. We have a lot on Sand Hill Road, and we were right next to Stanford University. So there's an interesting mix of tech, universities, and venture capital funding in my community, which has this interesting dynamic. And so we are always looking at our major issues right now are housing and transportation issues. In the Bay Area, that's been a huge problem for us. So we have many more jobs on our side of the Bay than we do housing, and housing is very, very expensive where we are. So we're all trying to build more housing, and we're trying to do it in a smart growth way by putting it near the Caltrain station, putting it high-density housing near public transit so that we can help people, encourage people to take public transit instead of driving cars, single occupancy cars everywhere. So those are some of the unique situations in our community, and we, as I said, 33,000 people and growing. And another interesting thing about Menlo Park is that we, in the state of California, had built the most housing per capita in the entire state last year. There was a long period in time where enough housing was not being built, and I think everybody now realizes this issue, and it's a crisis, and we're all stepping up to the plate and building a lot more housing.
Well, thank you. I'll go on to Mayor Rosenberg. You know, Mountain View is in the news a lot because of the number of companies and the types of companies that's located there, and so we know a little bit about it, but let's hear a challenge your city is facing and how equity and inclusion is used or applied to deal with that issue.
Thank you for having me today. So I'll start off with an introduction of what Mountain View is. Mountain View is a city of about just shy of 80,000 residents. We are north of San Jose, south of San Francisco. Menlo Park's about 10 miles away. We share some of the same issues. You may have heard of companies in Mountain View, most prominent being Google. They have about 28,000 jobs in Mountain View, clearly the largest employer. We also have Microsoft's largest facility outside of Washington. We have LinkedIn, which is now part of Microsoft, and Intuit. Those are our big major tech companies. We probably have more startups than any other cities that are adjacent to us as well. So we're right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Actually, I think San Jose says the heart of San Jose, but Mountain View likes to say we're the brains. So, some of the issues that Kirsten brought up are actually the exact same in Mountain View, probably writ large. The issue of housing is probably the most intractable. We have so many people that live within our community that are rich. They're rich because the Google stock, Apple's in the area, and so forth. All these people who are paper multimillionaires, and they translate that into a house, any house. But we don't have land. We're landlocked by a bay on one side and a mountain range on the other, essentially. And so there's nowhere to go except up. And luckily, the yes in my town outnumber the no in my town. So we have started to change our land use policies in Mountain View to accommodate higher density housing. But the idea of a single family home is kind of anathema in Mountain View at this point. The idea of having a front yard and a backyard and neighbor, there's no more land for that. So it's all high density housing now, which is going to create its own challenges. But the biggest issue we've faced since I've been on council for the last 3 years now is gentrification. Gentrification is a problem in Mountain View for a variety of reasons, but primarily because we're a community that really values our diversity, socioeconomic diversity, ethnic diversity, national diversity, and so forth. It's a really nice city to be in, but we're losing a core component of it. And we like to say we have problems of prosperity, but they're real problems. And the problem of rising rents, kicking people out, is only half of it, because a lot of those people still have jobs and they want to stay. So what do? They live in their vehicles. And the number of homeless in Mountain View, or people who aren't adequately housed, has gone up over 150% in just the last year and a half alone. And they're everywhere. And so the biggest problem we're having now is the people who are working in our city, who have children in our schools, and this is what started a citywide initiative to deal with a homeless problem, and this is generally not dealt with on a city level, especially a city of our size, is that when on a city council meeting about a year and a half ago, somebody said there were 30 children in our elementary school that were homeless. Number turned out to be closer to 150. So that to me was a very shocking problem to hear about, and we've spent a lot of resources ever since. So we can probably talk about that in a minute.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Salas, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you, and welcome to San Diego County. Chula Vista is located 7 miles south of where we are right now, downtown San Diego, and 7 miles north of the Mexican border. So we are right in the center of this economic mega region that's so diverse and economically, culturally, and we enjoy the benefits of all that. And for the folks that are here from other parts of the country, we see the border as an opportunity, not as a challenge. But the city of Chula Vista is about 106 years old now, and it's one of the more rapidly growing cities in the state of California. We have quite the different problem. We have had the opportunity to have our older west side, but then our newer east side that's been developed. That's been greenfield development, and we've been able to build some really quality housing of all types. We're built on a concept of new urbanism, and so we have dense village cores, and then they radiate to, higher end housing. And in our 13 villages, that's how many we have on the newer area. It's all interconnected with land that we had set aside during the general plan in the 80s dedicated for mass transit right away. So we did that first and then built the housing. And the opposite of your problem, about 75% of our people travel outside to their jobs for work. And so what our challenge has been is diversifying that economy, but it's coming because we were able to clear 550 acres of land on our bayfront, so sharing the San Diego Bay. And so we have an approval from the Coastal Commission. They approved our bayfront master plan, and if all of you don't know how difficult it is to develop in the state of California, especially on the coast, we're really far ahead. We're in negotiating agreements right now with a major hotel developer to build a 1,500-room hotel and also 500 square feet of convention space. So that's going to diversify our economy. And then also with Mayor Faulconer, the region was one of 10 areas to get a demonstration project for automated vehicles. And so on our east side, which has all been planned with connectivity and smart city type of things, that's where our demonstration project is actually starting now for that. And we're actually getting a lot of companies from the Bay Area that are developing that technology that are being embedded in the city of Chula Vista. So hopefully that will spur that kind of diversification of our economy as well. So those are kind of the challenges that we have. And I know that we're going to have some more panel questions where I can elaborate on that further.
Great. So are you telling these two mayors that you're stealing their companies? Is that what I heard?
We're
and
sharing.
that's what we
It's a
always
sharing
say.
economy.
I just want to know.
Yeah, no. The challenges of a lot of these major companies is that how do they retain their workforce when the housing prices are so so expensive.
The median
So
price
yes,
of a house in Mountain View is $2.1 million.
that is crazy, and the median price of a home now in Chula Vista is approaching about $450,000.
Wow.
And that's still really unaffordable for a lot of folks.
Great. Mayor Tubbs, you are Mayor of Stockton. You are the young person up here, not in age, only in age. He's been in office 8 months. That's what I meant by that, because I think I'm your age too most times. So, this is City Hall, huh?
I see.
Wait a minute. Wait. This is not City Hall. No. Mayor, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the things that's going on in Stockton and how you're managing this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for having me to the league and San Diego for hosting us. I would say just a brief overview of Stockton. Stockton is a city of 315,000 people. It's in the San Joaquin Valley. It's in between San Francisco and Sacramento. Stockton is incredibly diverse. 70% of my constituents are people of color. At one time, we had the most Filipinos outside the Philippines in the world. Huge Cambodian population, the oldest Sikh temple in North America, and about 37% Latino population. And about 30% of all of our residents are foreign-born, meaning they're immigrants. And in terms of inclusion, I think for us it's been a necessity on two fronts. The first thing was, over the past 8 months, we've been really accelerating our general plan amendment process. And generally, when we do community outreach, we have an answer, or someone has an answer already, and there's outreach to the community just to confirm their answer. But this time, we did actually real community outreach with real impacted communities, and we were able to gauge the temperature of the community as to how forward-thinking could we be with some of the land use decisions we have coming up. And to no surprise to me, but to surprise to a lot of folks in the community, from the barrio, and even some of the more distressed parts of our city were saying things like smart growth, infill, downtown focus, downtown revitalization. So we were able to pass principles not too long ago that's probably the most progressive and forward-thinking general plan we've ever had as a city. When just a decade ago, our general plan got sued by the Sierra Club for being too much sprawled out growth and not really thinking about inner core and revitalization. And the second way we're thinking about inclusion, a lot of it's because of my own biases and leanings, are really around how do we reach out to the most marginalized in our community, especially the less than 1% of the population that drives 80% of our violent gun crimes. So my idea of inclusion is looking at not just police being the only people they respond to, but other systems. A lot of these folks have trauma issues. A lot of these folks have employment issues. You name an issue, a lot of these folks have it. And if our response to them continues to be more cops, more law enforcement, we may win some points and get some shares at council meetings, but we won't actually lower our violent crime rate, which has been triple the state average for longer than I've been alive, for 30 years. In that same vein, we've been looking at, you saw I slipped that in there?
Yeah, I heard that. You saw I chuckled too, right? Yeah.
And then in the same vein, throughout the city, like in most cities, there's parts that are better, there's parts more affluent, and parts that are less affluent. So we've been spending a lot of time doing community organizing, but also a collective impact strategy around for these 5 areas throughout the city that have historically been the bad parts of town where bad things happen. What, again, can we offer to these communities more so than law enforcement? And the reason is twofold. Number one is spending a lot of time in our police department on city council, realized how exhausted they were because they were called on to be more than just cops. That half their job was spent being social workers or homeless case managers or parents or just things they're not trained to do. And on the flip side, in talking to the community folk, they were upset with all these different issues in their communities with schools aren't that great, or lack of access to grocery stores, or potholes not filled, or trash everywhere. And the only response from the institution is more cops. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking about for these 5 areas of our cities that are our focus areas now, how do we bring in the school district, the county, and other partners so we think about how do we improve these communities so it's not just sending cops to answer every social ill.
Well, thank you guys for that overview. And I do want to take advantage of this panel to give thought and ideas to other leaders in the room. You know, I talked about what happened in Las Vegas. And you know, we've seen Orlando and other communities go through similar things. How do you as leaders talk to your community about those kinds of tragedies when they happen? How do you as a leader bring your community together when they ask you questions during tough times like this?
I can start. I'm actually a criminal defense attorney, so In a lot of California, we are elected, we're mayors, but we have 1-year term and we rotate, whereas I know a lot of other parts of the country don't do that. So Ken and I are both have 1-year terms. So as a criminal defense attorney, I deal a lot with all sorts of issues that happen and make sure that people's rights are not being trampled. And one of the things that I approached our police chief about last year was doing mindfulness training. So when we look at, and I know Mayor Faulconer just talked about the divisions that are happening in our country, and it's tragic. It really is tragic. And I try and focus on the positives and the good things that we have in life. And but we do delve into these issues. And so I approached our police chief about doing mindfulness training. And I know at first, I think he was surprised when I brought it up, but there was a police officer up in Oregon named Richard Gerling who was teaching mindfulness to police officers. And the idea is to bring it all down and to help the whole community. I mean, I would like to see more mindfulness training in the schools. We're looking at bringing it to the city, to other places as well, because I think it just helps reduce the tension. And we recognize I recognize that police officers have a very tough job. And every time they're called to a situation, they have no idea what it's going to be. And it can end up in tragedy. And so in our community, we've instigated this, we set aside the money for it, and we've become the first police force in the nation where all of our police officers have now gone through the training. And I anticipate that this will probably happen in other parts of the country as our force continues to be looked at. It was written up briefly in Mindfulness Magazine and other places. So it'll be interesting to track over the next few years how this helps our community and how the officers are able to relate more to everybody that they are working with in the community.
You guys go ahead.
Mind if
Go ahead.
I'll just go around here. The name of this conference is Big Ideas. So let me share with you an idea that we implemented in Mountain View. In fact, it's probably the reason I'm on city council. A number of years ago, I was the chair of the board of a neighborhood association. And one of the responsibilities of the chair was to moderate the neighborhood email list. So they can all, usually it's, does anybody have a name for a plumber or things like that? But we had the day worker center being moved from one part of Mountain View to the next. And the area it was being moved to was the downtown area where we lived. So there's about 2,200 units in that area at the time. And people were really up in arms about the day workers. These are the people that are normally outside of a Home Depot. Well, we have a center in Mountain View where they go so they don't congregate on the street. And it was being moved into the downtown area. And people were just saying the most horrific things. And it occurred to me that we need a better way to get everybody talking to each other rather than sniping each other electronically. So raise your hand if in your city you have some version of a human rights commission or a human relations committee. Good, but not every hand. So I joined at the time, I wasn't on council at the time, but I joined the Human Relations Commission of Mountain View with an idea. I want people to talk to each other. And some of it can be proactive and some of it can be reactive. So what eventually happened is I created something what is now known regionally as the Civility Roundtable Discussion Series. And now it's twice a year. And it'll take the Human Relations Commission will take one major topic of the day, generally very controversial topic, and bring it for a discussion. And it's literally a circle of people. We'll have a few people in the middle, and the residents of Mountain View sit around it. It's not a Q&A, it's not a panel like this. There's no interaction between the audience to talk to the panelists and so forth, or the participants, as I like to call them. And we've talked about some very, very hard issues, including after Ferguson. Can Ferguson happen here? Where we had our police chief on as one of the people talking and so forth, and county supervisor and so forth. Very emotional topics at times. And so the way to get people feeling involved and included is to get them talking to each other. Get them out from behind their screens and get them to meet their neighbors. And that's what we do.
So the city of Chula Vista, again, is a very diverse community. And we have immigrants basically from Mexico, other places too, but from Latin America and Mexico. So we're about 50% Latino, and we have families such as mine that have been in Chula Vista since 1919, almost 100 years, to people that have just recently immigrated. So it's really a challenge, trying to reach all people, but we've managed to do that. I'm the first Latina that was ever elected to the city council, and the first mayor that was ever elected to the city council as mayor in the city. But it's really been my mission. I come from the background of community-based organizations, and so we established a resident leadership academy, and we have it located in a couple of our schools in some of our more challenged neighborhoods, where we actually get these recent immigrants to come, and they go through a whole coursework of what it means to be civically engaged. How do you talk to your council people? How do you demand that your streets are paved, or that your landlord is taking care of the apartments without fear of being evicted? And so that Resident Leadership Academy has really given voice to people that normally don't. That's how you do it. You have to go out and outreach. You can't issue an invitation to people and expect them to come to City Hall. So, that's a model that we followed. Also, the city of Chula Vista has a very low staffing ratio in terms of our police department. So we have 0.78 police officers for every 1,000 residents that we have. And so part of the problem is our lack of diversification of our economy, right? And so we have to make do with what we have. And so since the early 90s, we've engaged in community-based policing. We build up trust with our police officers. We have, resident citizen academies, and we go out and we seek those people from disadvantaged communities to be part of that. We have one of the lowest crime rates in San Diego County. So the amount of your policing doesn't necessarily equate to the safety of your citizens. It takes a cooperative effort and bringing them in. We had a human relations commission that a mayor felt 10 years ago we didn't need it. Well, with this new administration, people in my community were feeling fearful. We have a lot of DACA students. We have a lot of people that are here that may not be documented, but they are serving our community. They're working in all these hotels and restaurants here in San Diego County, making life comfortable for others, whether they're caring for the elderly, child care, yards, you name it. And they're really a significant part of the economy. And so it's really incumbent that we took this approach. So I reestablished the Human Relations Commission. And what we're doing right now, we're in the process of filling those positions. And I'm making sure that we get good representation from every aspect of the protected classes, whether you be LGBT, whether it be a religious minority, whether it be a racial minority, an economic disadvantage, whether also we have representation for people that are very pro-police. We want a good balance and a good discussion. So we have been very, very lucky in the city of Chula Vista that we have very good race relationships and that we have the trust of our citizens, but it's that constant going out and going to them, not expecting them to seek you out, and having programs that are really meaningful and not just fluff talk.
Mayor Tubbs?
I'm sorry, I was paying attention to all the answers, but help me, can you repeat the question for me?
Oh God, I made that one up. So they gave me no cards. It really started with what's going on around America or Las Vegas and Orlando, and how do you talk to your citizens about this? What are they looking for from you in these tough times?
It's a great question. And much like the other mayors already mentioned, I would just add that I think I didn't expect it to be so much of my job when I was elected. It seems like every week or every other week I'll have to issue some sort of statement about something that had nothing to do with me. I didn't tweet it. I didn't say it. but I have to respond to people for it. And I also think that given the national ranker, I think there is room to be very bold and audacious about American values, right? Because I think oftentimes that's what's missed in this whole rhetoric. It's not about a person, it's not about a Twitter account, it's really about American values, the American people, and what do we hold true as a country. So I know it gets on some people's nerves back home, but on every issue, especially like when things like DACA, when there's some of my friends are actually impacted or affected, or my first campaign manager for city council is also the founder of our city's Pride Center. Like so everything that's attacked, it's something I feel almost viscerally. So very, very, very focused on being bold and using well, I have the pulpit if you're not going to use it, so I have the pulpit to speak, but doing so in a way that's not alienating, it's not values, but I think we also can fall victim to this idea of false equivalencies, which I just routinely oppose. Like both sides aren't equally right on every issue. Like racism is not okay. Homophobia is not okay. There's no other, I don't need to see another side. It's wrong, right? When we're talking about human lives. So just being very bold about that, but also making sure it's about values though. It's about what we say we value opportunity. We say this country is built on this, this, and this. I oppose this. It's against what we value as a community. And in Stockton, this is what we're doing for this group, around this, and we could be a model for what does plurality look like, because we all don't agree, we all don't look alike, we all don't make the same amount of money, but we all live in the same ecosystem. So how do we kind of not just coexist, but draw on each other's strengths to really make our community grow?
Can I say one more thing too on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
On that topic, when you're right about, I didn't think this year was going to be the way this year is either. I thought my year as mayor was going to be very different. And it has been very different, not the way that I thought it would be. And so immediately in January, our residents started saying, we want a sanctuary city. Mm-hmm. And so, boom, January, out the gate, here we go, sanctuary city. And we didn't, we said, okay, well, we're going to research this. We have to have public hearings and meetings on this. But I mean, that's my community. Like I said, we're about 20 miles south of San Francisco. And we have, we've got Democrats, we've got Republicans, we've got everybody. In fact, my council is made up of 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. But, so the sanctuary city came up, and then immediately also the Muslim registry question. That came up, and so we said, well, we don't want we don't know what's gonna happen. So instead of just making this an anti-Muslim registry, we're gonna have an ordinance that says there will be no registries. And so these types of issues came up. And like I said, I wasn't expecting this to be this way. So we pursued the sanctuary city, and residents in Menlo Park actually purchased lawn signs, and there were lawn signs popping up saying, protect us, basically, protect us. And so we ended up passing an ordinance, and we became we're calling ourselves a safe city. And we put a lot of the protections in that you would find would be in we all know there's no definition of what a sanctuary city is, but we put many protections in place for people. And then we said we would look at this in a year. We'll revisit in a year and see if we need it, because the state of California was possibly going to become a sanctuary state. We just didn't know. But there's so much angst, and people are so fearful. And I work with a lot of Spanish-speaking Latino clients, because I do speak Spanish fluently from living in Chile, in Santiago. And there was just so much angst that we did something. And, there's more to come, right? Because we keep getting surprised with things.
But I think, and you're going to my next question, because each of you, how do you lead in this time of trying to be inclusive, given the background of the national rhetoric and the local?
Well, it's not that hard right now, because it's challenging, but the concept of inclusion is just don't believe anything coming out of our federal government. I mean, it's garbage. Now, I want to say something that if you're a Republican in the room, catch me afterwards, because you're going to have to educate me. The other National Leagues of City a couple years ago, Joe Biden was speaking. Anybody there? Yeah. Okay. Do you remember him talking about how awesome we were in the room because we're on the front lines, you know, the city council, mayors, we're dealing not only with potholes but local issues and so forth. He was a champion. I mean, I walked out of there feeling really, really good about myself. And I woke up Saturday morning feeling pissed off because the President of the United States picked on a mayor of a hurricane-laden, you know, destroyed area, and I felt personally offended. And so what I did, personally what I did is it was Yom Kippur and I had to go to services and so forth, so I just put out a Facebook post and it's my mayor page, and I said, how can we help? How can we help? How can Mountain View, this tiny city, relatively tiny city, but prosperous, how can we help? I went away for a few hours, came back in the evening, had more responses than anything else I've ever posted. And so people are engaged. And I don't know if that's inclusion or not, but it's just like standing up to the ridiculousness comments coming out of it. This guy is picking on the leader of an American city. What's up with that? So, sorry, I'm getting all fired up here, but this,
Yes.
you know, I am frequently heard saying, either from the council dais or from Mountain View's become the Berkeley of the South Bay now. We have more rallies in Mountain View than we do in Berkeley now. I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but it's right at City Hall, and I'm happy to see it. But I'll take the microphone at these events, and I'll say, it's a sad day when we have to protect ourselves from the federal government. So, but I'm getting people's attention by saying such things. So, you know, I'm a fairly compassionate person, and I know that when I took the gavel from our previous mayor, she was the mayor of homelessness and that issue and so forth. And I'm the mayor of Trump, you know? And she whispered in my ear because of how I'm going to, you know, I created the Civility Roundtable and so forth. And right before Trump got inaugurated, I was able to help shepherd through Mountain View becoming a human rights city. So there's something called a sanctuary city, there's something called a freedom city, and then there's something called a human rights city, which kind of envelopes them all. And remember during the Democratic Convention when that Mr. Khan held up the Constitution? I carry the Declaration of Human Rights. This is what I carry. And there's 30 of them. And I'm really passionate about human rights, and I'm really passionate about the residents of Mountain View understanding that they have them. And to find out from the federal government that some people don't and some people don't, it's just terrible. But anyway, I could talk all day about being a human rights city. There's only 11 in the United States, 33 in the world, and Mountain View was the latest addition to that list. And we can talk about that later.
Well, I'd like to share the discussion that we had in Chula Vista, and compare it to some discussions that were occurring in other San Diego cities. And I was really shocked at the way some of the rhetoric and the discussion evolved at some other cities that were, pretty far away from the border. And so people were coming to us and demanding that we become a sanctuary city. And I refused to adopt that phrase. And the reason that I did is that it has just become this rhetoric and this target for all these insane comments that, oh, that means that you're going to be harboring criminals or some other such silly things. What we did is that we became a welcoming city. And what the welcoming city did for us, it just restated our values as a community. Mm-hmm. It was a statement of our principles and our values and how we afforded dignity to all people. It was also an affirmation of our police policies that we've had in place for many, many years, and that was policy number 428, which says that you shall not stop someone just based on their appearance, or when they are stopped, you are not going to enforce, you're not going to ask them their immigration status, and that each person deserves the full protection of the law. It was a value statement that we made. It was not without controversy, and I have a council that's 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats at all. But at the end of the day, we were able to get a unanimous vote that yes, we are a welcoming city, because it's an affirmation of our values, an affirmation that each person in our community that lives there deserves the full protection of our Constitution. And I was really, really proud of this city, that we went through that whole discussion, people that were opposed to us saying that, oh, you're going to be a haven for outlaws and all the outlaws are going to come to your city and be harbored there. You know, that's just nonsense talk that was coming out of, quite frankly, some really irresponsible TV news things. And, you know, it's like I wish people that did not live in our world, did not live in a city like the city of Chula Vista, could come and see what it's really like. Yeah. To come and see what it is to live in a border community like San Diego, or all these great cities that have this really vibrant interconnectedness with our neighbors to the south. And yes, there's crime, and yes, there's violence on the other side. Yes, there is. But, you know, there's also a lot of really other good things, too, that basically the people on the other side are very decent and hardworking people. And the people that come here want just the same thing as anyone else that immigrated here from Ellis Island, or if they came through El Paso, it's the same as my grandparents. They don't understand that the people that came from Ellis Island, that was an immigration post just like El Paso was. And you paid the same head tax that you did in Ellis Island, because that's all it took there. It took a head tax and a clean bill of health to get in the United States back then. And that's how my grandparents came. So when people talk about, well, my family came the right way, what is the right way? You know, it was a lot different back then. It was a lot easier to get into the United States. And so we really simply must do something to fix our immigration laws, because the United States, not just our area, the whole United States is very dependent on the workforce that comes across the border, and that's just a fact.
Thank you. Mayor Tubbs, you sort of started this question by talking about...
I did not.
Yes, you did.
You get blamed anyway.
American values and how you kind of use this. I want to ask you to respond to how do you lead during these times, but also transfer to a question around economic inclusion, because, you know, we can all sort of talk about opportunity, but if you're really not prosperous and you can't afford the housing, how do you do a little bit both of those, lead through this trying time, but also create an inclusive community that provides for economic participation by all?
Yeah, man. Oh, tough question. So I was ready to go on Trump.
No, you notice I was trying to get...
I thought we were there. I was ready.
No, Mayor Rosenberg trying to hijack my panel. You're not going to hijack my panel, Mayor.
No, I stopped talking.
In terms of economic inclusion, that's kind of item 1A and 1B on our priority list. So what we're doing now, we're working with the University of the Pacific and this group called Valley Vision to really map out this idea of the skills gap. Because in 2012, the Brookings Institute did a report on the top 100 metro areas. And Stockton was 95th in terms of preparedness for the jobs that exist in the surrounding area. And with kind of the escalating housing costs in the Bay Area, in Sacramento, more and more people are coming to Stockton, which is making, we had the highest rising rents in this country, if not, in the state, if not the country, the past quarter, while people's wages aren't increasing. And a lot of it is because almost 52% of our jobs are at the minimum wage level. So long story short, what we're doing is we're looking at exactly, very specifically, what are the skills and tools people need to be included in this economy. The economy that exists in Stockton and the greater Bay Area, but the economy that also exists in the future. Number two, and that's going to start in January, we're looking at, okay, what are the partnerships, the systems, the collaborations between our K-12 institutions, between our community college, and between our technical institutions to actually get people a certification that leads to a job. Because a part of my listening work, a lot of folks will be like, I went to job training programs, but I'm still unemployed. Now, I was annoyed hearing it, so I can only imagine what it's like to do that and then still be unemployed. So then another part of this inclusion agenda is talking to different companies in Stockton and also in our surrounding communities to say, if these folks, you have these openings for data scientists, if I could train this many folks with this certification to be data scientists, will you hire them? So essentially, to answer your question, it's number one, looking at kind of where the gaps are. Number two, building the partnerships needed to address the gaps. And number three, we're We're also talking with companies like Udacity and others to pilot some programs in Stockton to massively train people, especially for the jobs that exist in the tech sector, but folks who wouldn't be the first in line. So not my students at the University of the Pacific, but my folks who live in some of our focus neighborhoods. So hopefully by next year, I'll have some actionable report outs, but we are beginning the work.
Okay. What about Mayor?
Yes,
Salas?
in Chula Vista, it's really great because there's a great entrepreneurial spirit within the immigrant community. And so a lot of them are starting their own small businesses. So what we're doing as a city is that we have programs that do energy assessments for them, that give them some breaks and some incentives to improve their storefronts and all of that. So we think that that's a really important component of it. Also, in Chula Vista, we have we're doing a lot of training for people that are entering the solar industry. With solar installation, our city is putting a lot of solar on our roofs, and so we really believe that that particular sector is really creating a lot of jobs. And again, that may take maybe a 6-month course to get up to speed and to be able to get a really well-paying job. So those are some of the things that we're doing, but the entrepreneurial spirit and the number of new businesses that are opening that are these little mom and pops that then grow bigger and bigger. And it's not just taco trucks, and we love our taco trucks, but it's a whole a variety of services that people are, landscaping services, tree pruning, you name it, and they're there. Daycare centers that we're training people to be providers of daycare, because that's a big demand, right? A lot of people need a very safe and reliable place to leave their children while they work. So, working with those communities in order for them to be able to, build their prosperity as well. And we're still seeking to get the big jobs, the big techs. We want to steal Facebook. We want to, all those things. But the reality is, in the United States, that most new job creation is done by small businesses, and so that's where we focus a lot of our attention as well.
Mayor Rosen.
So that plus, we have a very unique program in Mountain View, where if you live in Mountain View or work in Mountain View but do not have a college education, it will be provided to you for free. So you can get a BA for free through a partnership we have with a local company in Mountain View called Study.com. Right now, if you go to your smartphone, go to Study.com, you can learn about the platform. You can't get it for free, but you come to Mountain View. So the issue that we have is kind of twofold. One, we have some people who are making minimum wage. We raised minimum wage in Mountain View. It was one of my first votes on council was to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2018. So we're at 13 right now. So on January 1st, it'll turn to 15. But even that's poverty wages in Mountain View, unfortunately. So we're working on supply of housing to get the rents lower. I think what's happening in Stockton is a direct spillover effect from Silicon Valley. And then we had rent control, so that's one issue that came up. I don't want to talk about that if I can get away from it, but it's a loaded issue. But we're trying to keep the supply of housing going up. We have about 33,000 units, dwelling units of all stripes in Mountain View. And just last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, council voted on putting up housing in what we refer to as the North Bayshore area. So if you were looking at a map, it's the area near the bay. That's where Google's headquartered. It's one of the biggest office parks around. It's one of the most coveted office parks around. I'm not exaggerating. Land is about $20 million an acre. Yeah. And we're doing the precise plan for that area, and when it passes in November, it'll be up to 10,000 new housing units, so the land use will change. That's a third more housing for the city of Mountain View. That makes a dent. So education for people and a bigger supply of housing, which should drop the prices. That's one of the things we're doing, and we're trying to preserve our community.
Mayor.
Thanks. we're doing many of the similar things you've heard as well. Building more housing. We just did a general plan update for the land in our community that is east of Highway 101, which is the major highway that goes up and down the state. And we're working with Facebook. We rezoned the properties, and so Facebook would be building 1,500 new units, and they would be available for the public, for everybody. And then we put a 15% below market rate housing top on that, so there'd be about 225 below market rate units in there. And then in Menlo Park, just talking about, we have the same problem about gentrification issues, which is a serious problem. But in Menlo Park, we were the first city in our county to implement this commercial linkage fee, so that when there were commercial projects going up, there would be a certain percentage put aside for below market rate housing. So we just had people move back into one of our big projects that we just did. That's beautiful. It's 141 units, and it looks fantastic. And the city spent $6.7 million, and we partnered with Mid-Penn Housing. So we partner with our affordable housing partners, and they're in Mountain View. They're very active in our area. But another thing we have to look at when we're talking about equity issues, and this has been something that I think Kamala Harris has been talking about lately, are the fines and fees. So we just held a meeting on in our local, actually, League of Cities, fines, fees, and equity. And we're finding, when our residents get caught up in the criminal justice system and they end up getting these enormous fines, they can't repay them. And then it puts them into this bind, and all sorts of terrible repercussions happen. Their credit gets ruined, they might not get they lose their license or can't get their driver's license back. And so there's this horrible snowball effect. So I think for me, I want to focus more on this also, the fines, fees, and equity issue. We had a speaker come from the San Francisco Treasurer's Office, and they're looking at this issue very heavily over the last year. And I don't feel like we need to reinvent the wheel. I'll be watching a lot of what they're doing. We had a speaker come and talk to us about what they're doing. When you look at the fines that are collected, a lot of them aren't collected. So one of the points that they're trying to make in San Francisco is that if those fines are reduced, that the collection rate would probably go up. And so even though the fines could be reduced, you might find that the cities are actually collecting more. And it's costing less to do the collection, because it's very expensive for cities to try to collect all these fines. And the other thing I want to talk about is Job Train. In Menlo Park, we have Job Train, which is formerly OICW, and we work with people to help them get the training that they need, and we work with our community colleges to make sure that they're actually training on what our businesses are requiring. I think one of the things we need to get clear, though, with our businesses, our Googles, our Facebooks, our Apples, is that if somebody graduates from one of these programs, hire them. We have to get over having a stigma about community colleges or vocational colleges or any of those things, and say, look, these are important jobs as well, and we need to get over it. Hire these people. They're good. They're going to do good work, and just because they don't have, a Stanford education, as Mayor Tubbs does, which is fabulous. I mean, that's awesome. But not everybody has that. And we need to make sure that our businesses are willing to hire those people that don't.
Can I just jump in on one other thing? Because I think this is something that's incredibly low-hanging fruit. There's a platform called Kiva, kiva.org. If any of you guys reach out to them as representatives of your cities, they'll come in, do a workshop. You guys will be a Kiva city. So we did that in Stockton, and we had like 100 people come to this meeting, and now we have all these people signing up for, when they could have done it without us, but when we held the meeting, it became like a thing. And that's been a way to get folks access to low interest or no interest loans in a way that they probably wouldn't have. It was just literally going to kiva.org and emailing them and say, hey, come to Stockton, and they did it.
So to Mayor Tubbs and all the mayors, we're at this kickoff of the 2017 Big Ideas for Cities, sponsored by National League of Cities University. What have you found that is really important about sharing and learning in your roles as you took over as being mayors or council members? Sharing and going to conferences like this, have you found value in any of this kind of engagement?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is going back and sharing ideas with folks who weren't at the conference and who weren't at the presentation and don't have that's the hard part. Like the conference and taking the notes and getting excited, that's the easy part. I don't know if I answered your question. Tell me the question.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if you come by yourself and you learn so much and then you go back to city council meeting or commission meeting and say, oh my God, that conference was great and nobody else was there, I do think that can be a challenge.
Well, if you
sometimes.
want to feel good, then I have a great story. So I was a freshman council member, and I went to wherever it was, and one of the ideas in the breakout session was Uber or Lyft instead of a parking garage. So I took that back, and it took about 2.5 years, but I learned it at an MLC conference, and guess what? We have a very vibrant downtown, and everybody complains that there's no parking, and parking garages at $60,000 to $70,000 per spot are just too expensive to build. So we partnered up with Lyft and Uber, and we made kind of a geo fence around Mountain View and said, if you're a Mountain View resident, you can take an Uber or Lyft from your house to specific spots in the downtown. We'll drop off, and it'll start later this month. So it's a pilot program, but we've done that, and it's going to save the city millions of dollars. And because Google, I'll just pick on Google. They're one of the leading developers of autonomous vehicles, and they're all over Mountain View all the time. We just figured that the idea of a parking garage is dated. We're not going to need it in 5-10 years, so it's like, why build it? So we're biding time basically until kind of that whatever happens in the autonomous vehicle world and
See, that's great. Hey,
Send that to me.
Tim, you need to get this commercial from this guy.
that's why I use NLC.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'll piggyback on that good story. That I knew that Mountain View was looking at doing this because I watch and what my fellow colleagues are doing. But I was at the March NLC conference that I went to the breakout session on this topic with Uber and Lyft and learned a little bit more. And I know Lenny Siegel was there from Mountain View. But so I took that back to my council as well because, again, I'm all about sharing and borrowing ideas. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of things. And if some city is doing something wonderful and we learned about it at the National League of Cities, bring it on back and let's try and implement it. So I brought this idea back to my city council, and same thing. I mean, building parking structures is very expensive, especially if you are going to go underground too. So I brought this back thinking, this makes sense to me. This makes perfectly good sense. Bring people down. They don't have to drive. They can drink if they want a dinner and not have to be represented by a defense attorney if they pick up a DUI. It makes it safe. And also, they don't have to hassle with trying to find a parking space. And that was the key thing. And I feel the same way that as time leads on, our community is clamoring for a parking garage. And I'm interested, and I'm interested also, though, in we own the property, this lot. We own several lots that are just single structure parking lots. And I'm interested in the idea, we're doing a design charrette with our Chamber of Commerce and with Facebook, in looking at different things that we can do with that. And probably some of you have already done these things, but having the parking and then having housing on top, or putting commercial or resident or retail on the first floor and then going up with the housing and the parking above it. Or maybe a movie theater, or all sorts of ideas that we can think of to utilize the land going up, because the land value is so high. But I think also, I love going to these conferences and learning things. I think when you're a mayor that rotates every year, it becomes more difficult, and as Mayor Faulconer was talking about, you want to get in and move quickly. If you have a 4-year term and you're coming to these conferences, you have a great opportunity to use these ideas, because you can help set the agenda, and you can, when you're doing your goal setting in January, you can put these ideas right in. And I think that's fantastic. It becomes more challenging as we rotate annually.
And I think it's really important to attend these conferences to see what other cities are doing, in order to see, is this going to fit within my city? Because we have cities here that represent so many small, large, rural, urban, and all the needs are different, all the challenges are different, but being able to learn from them and picking the best practices to bring back to your city, I think that's a good thing. So, I've always enjoyed going to the conferences as well. And I really believe that, going to school on others. We have the mayor of Solana Beach here, and so she's very involved with Encinitas. I'm sorry. So, they're very involved in getting together community choice aggregation. And so, instead of us spending the money on the feasibility study, which can be very, very expensive, we're taking that wait and see attitude to see how they implement, how it's going to be done in order to make sure that we can do it in our city as well, to get us to that 1% or 100% renewables by 2035 as well.
Well, let me now turn to the audience, if any member of the audience has a question, if you would come and state your name and the question that you have for the mayors. And I will say I used to run city commission meetings as a former mayor myself, so we're going to have a question. Y'all used to this, so a question. Go ahead, Alexander. And state where you're from in Georgia.
See, you already did it for me.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
First of all, thank you all for your presentations and for what you said. I'm Alexander Gothard. I am from East Point, Georgia. I see a lot of my other Georgia folks, Mayor Vince, a few other my Georgia folks in the audience, but we are definitely represented here. But anyway, to my question. So there's a lot of talk about divisiveness, especially with the talk of you all's love for our president. And with that being said, we see a lot of people kneeling. We see a lot of people sitting during the Pledge of Allegiance. Question for you is, what if your city council came to you and they said, we don't want to stand during the Pledge of Allegiance? What would be your response to that? What do you hope it would accomplish? And do you think it is necessary?
Thank you.
I mean, for me, I'm a criminal defense attorney. If somebody wants to kneel, they have every right to kneel. I mean, we need to make sure that we protect people's constitutional rights, and people have that right. It's a form of protest that is nonviolent, and I don't see any problem with it whatsoever.
I was asked by a member of the public right after I became mayor to actually end the practice of having the Pledge of Allegiance ahead of the council meeting. And I politely responded, it's not a battle I want to have right now. But it was an interesting thought. I have all sorts of ideas on this, but they're kind of in line with what Kirsten said. This is not, we're very progressive. If somebody wants to protest silently, that is their right. In fact, at the last council meeting, I stood up and I said, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and if anybody would like to sit, it's perfectly fine with me. Nobody chose.
Yeah, I think that, this whole discussion around the sitting or standing, it's taken way too much time and attention of the public. I don't think that your patriotism is based on whether or not you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I think your patriotism is proven by your everyday actions, and that's just the way that I feel.
I'd be shocked if my council did that. I was like, whoa, what? Most of them. But I would say it's a kneel in, right? I think oftentimes people protest because they don't have other avenues to exercise power, but when you're in a seat of governance, you can actually do some things with policy and resolutions and legislation. So I would say do that, but what are we going to do with this agenda, with these resources, kind of actualize some of the things we're protesting about?
I love to see the protests. It means something. These people have something to say. We have to listen.
Our host council member from Charlotte, North Carolina. That's
Okay,
where our
so
city
LaWanna
summit
Mayfield.
is. That's where our city summit is. Go ahead, Lou.
Good afternoon, everyone. LaWanna Mayfield, it's already been said, Charlotte, North Carolina. Mayor Rosenberg, question for you. With thinking about the fact that you have lots that are selling for $20 million, have you all created language through your planning department that clearly specifies 10%, 15%, 20%, of 30% to 50% of your area median income in order to ensure that you have diverse price point, especially when I walk walked around and was in Escondido earlier looking at the homeless population that's around, do you have language, or are y'all looking at language, since you only have 1 year, to put in place to ensure diverse price point
Talk about
housing
housing, yes. Okay,
for the new area when you have an
Yeah.
acre going for 20 million?
Yeah, we have several means in Mountain View to collect. The city itself has several means to collect funds that we can use for affordable housing. Kristen, yeah, we have commercial linkage fees. So if somebody's building an office building, I think it's like I don't even remember. Forgive me for not remembering the numbers because there's too many of them. But there's like $22 a square foot. So we get millions of dollars for every office building that's built. If somebody's building an apartment complex. It's a little complicated in California due to a law, but or a court case that overturned things. You can't demand that they build a certain amount of inclusionary housing, but they can. We can twist their arm a bit. We have about 15% in the North Bay Shore that I described before, with the almost 10,000 units. 20%. So we're going to have 2,000 units of affordable housing in the North Bay Shore. So the answer is yes, and we have all sorts of other fees. It's very expensive to build in Mountain View, and we cannot turn the people away. I mean, they're just coming and coming and coming. They just want to keep building.
We have the same
Yeah,
issue,
same thing
the
in-
same price points.
Yeah.
Fort Worth, Texas. Go ahead.
My name is Gina Bivens. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. I got my cowboy boots on. And my district has 92,000 people in it. And my district is home to Bell Helicopter, American Airlines, DFW Airport, which is the third busiest in the nation. I'd like to know if you guys can elaborate on workforce preparedness, workforce competitiveness, but also literacy. What programs do you have? Because we've got to make sure we've got people who are ready for the jobs. And I heard your program that you have, but I haven't heard much about workforce and literacy. So if you could, anyone who can talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Tubbs, you want to, I know you were talking a little bit about how you were working to make sure people were matched up, if you will, to the opportunities.
Yeah, so one of the things we're doing is we're talking to our big employers and getting some specificity as to what are the skills needed. Number two, we have a university partner also doing that research, so we inform kind of the conversation anecdotal with some real quantitative. That should be done in December. And then from there, there'll be some recommendations about what are the certifications specifically that folks need for the jobs that exist and will exist. And it'll be our responsibility to make that actionable with some dollars, but also some commitments. Like we build the partnerships, they get this certification, they hire. We just had Amazon who's coming in and bringing a bunch of jobs, but I just want to make sure that our folks in Stockton can get those jobs. So that's kind of impetus for a lot of this work. And then number two, what we're finding is that a lot of it has to do with our K-12 system as well. So our school district is now on the table as a co-chair of this whole workforce development plan, along with our county workforce investment board, their chair. And they're really thinking about the resources they have existing, how can they leverage those and use those to their highest and best use, and how can our schools begin having students think about college or career, but before they're 17 years old. And in addition to that, we're partnering with a company called Udacity next year around jobs specifically in the tech space. So whether it's your data scientists or your front-end web designers, et cetera, and getting them through their nano degree program, which is 3 to 6 months. And then after that, working with the big hospital employers to say, okay, if they complete this nano degree, will you hire them? So I think, so to answer your question, I think it's being really, really intentional, but it starts with having some specificity around what the need is. Because I know when I was on council for 4 years, we spent all this time on workforce development, but I would ask people like, okay, well, what are the skills people need? I couldn't get an answer, or an answer rooted in evidence. So it'd be like, oh, people gotta show up on time, which is true. And people can't be coming to work high, which is true, but that's not everyone. That's not everyone. That's like rooted in biases and somewhat racist. It's like coded language anyway. So I was like, okay, that's cool, but what are the skills? And now we're actually having a conversation about they need this skills. Where can they get these skills? If we can build out the skills, how do we bring those programs in? So that's kind of our plan, and hopefully by next year at this time we'll have some exciting matrix who's like these many people did this much training and got this job.
So in the city of Chula Vista, what we've done is we've repurposed the basement of our library, and we work with the school district, and then we also have partnered with Qualcomm, which is a high-tech, well, everybody knows Qualcomm. But anyway, we've partnered with the school district, with Qualcomm and the city, so we lend the space. And what we've done there is we've remodeled that whole area into this lab for young students. So from 1st to 6th grade, the elementary school district is sending in kids to learn all about robotics and coding. So it starts at that early age. They have to be born into the technology, right? And so, I've been in the Think a Bit lab, which is what they call it. And I'm talking to these little 7-year-olds that are telling me about coding, and they're moving the little robot and all of this, and I'm lost in all of this, okay? Because that's not my world. But, it takes a partnership with your school districts and beginning from really, really young to get, especially this population of students that their parents they're not in that tech world and all of that, but just bringing them along, and that's been a really, really great program.
It's neat.
I'll share with you one statistic.
Okay.
I think this is interesting. Just a statistic from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. The United States corporations have a voracious appetite for new computer science graduates of about 150,000 graduates per year. That's what they want. That's what the corporations want. United States universities graduate about 55,000 per year. So workforce development starts very young.
Wow. Yes, sir.
I'm Stephen Bond. I'm from Hampton, Virginia, and I feel really blessed and fortunate to come from a city where our city council and our city leadership does value inclusion, and we believe also that it begins with the conversation. But my specific question is, are there specific techniques that you've found to include people in the conversation who tend not to be interested in government or tend not to want to join the conversation? Because we need to have that full range of people there and involved and actively involved in the conversation to get to the best results. So what are some techniques that you found or strategies that you found to get people who are usually not involved in that conversation at the table?
Yeah, I'll start it. That's a really good question. I'm sure we all struggle with that. And it seems like, some of it is the most labor intensive, and that is knocking on doors and going to people and, taking flyers in their language to them and talking to them and letting them know about meetings coming up or, going and surveying at the door. Not everybody has a computer or a smartphone to do all these things on. A lot of people do, but not everybody does. And so when we're trying to get the different voices, we are going out on computers, we're going out on Nextdoor. Can I just ask how many people use Nextdoor?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Nextdoor, all sorts of social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, whatever you can muster. But I think the good old fashioned, if you're in a huge city, I know it becomes much more difficult. In a smaller community, it is labor intensive, and you've got to get people going door to door because it's hard to get their attention. And we try and utilize neighborhood groups as well. So making sure that the neighborhood groups know what we're doing so that they can also help us get the word out. But that's always the biggest concern, is not getting everybody's voice.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Noah Frigo. I'm from the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, and my main question is, does your city have a citywide definition of equity? If so, what does that look like? What is it? How is it defined? If not, is there any momentum in the equity work that you're doing to establish that baseline?
Well, I'll tell you this, now that we're reestablishing the Human Rights Commission, we are charging them with specific jobs. So we don't have that on the agenda, but that would be a perfect thing for that commission to tackle as they're getting up and running. So yeah, that would be great.
Anything else? Okay. Yes, this is the last question because my staff is telling me I'm over. So go ahead.
Joyce Mathis, Natchez, Mississippi, Councilwoman. Question is, how do you handle pushback from communities when you look at bringing in affordable housing into the communities, when you look at bringing in retirement homes, any of the 15% lower, what you just talked about doing, how do you handle pushback? Thank you.
We talk about who those people are. When you're talking about, I don't want affordable housing units, it's like, well, if you look at the price of housing, it's pretty high. That could be your teachers, your firefighters, your police officers, the bakers, the people who are, cleaning your home. It's like the people who are working in your community. It also looks like your children, right? Because are your children going to be able to come back and live in the community that you've helped create? And if not, do you want them to? And if you want them to, then you probably need to be working on helping create more affordable housing.
So me and my staff get into it all the time. But I'm like, you only have 48 years. You don't need 100% to win. You need 51%. So pushback's inevitable. So as long as we have the votes to do it, I'm like, let's do it. Because clearly there's a majority of, if I get 4 votes, we're going to be all right. So that's part of it. But I say that because I think oftentimes, just 5 years in local government, the things I got the most pushback on, because oftentimes the pushback is just a very vocal group of small people who are vocal about everything, but they don't represent no one but themselves, right? It's like, and they matter, they're humans, we care, but it's like 5 people. Like, it seems like a lot because they're on Nextdoor and Facebook, but then they ain't really got no juice behind them. So then it's being able to discern that. And then I think that the third thing is really, most of the good things we've done, there was quote unquote pushback, and now people love it. So like the same people who don't want affordable housing are tired of seeing homeless people. Well, duh, let's put them in housing, right? So I think sometimes you just gotta do it, and then just make sure you clearly articulate, though, afterwards, how it's been successful, so the haters are quiet.
I've seen community attitudes change a lot. I was first elected to the city council in '96, so over 20 years ago, and the city was just starting that spurt of growth. And so there were a lot more community groups that were vocal, and the NIMBYs, right, not in my backyard. And as the city has developed and they see affordable housing projects in our integrated right in our communities, you can't tell whether they're affordable or not. I think that the resistance has definitely, died way down. And, a lot of those folks, they've just like aged out of the system too. So a lot of the protesters that we had way back in the day, I mean, it's the truth, right? I mean, I think that, younger people realize that there's a tremendous demand and a need for housing. So we see fewer and fewer people coming to the city council that are protesting densification or affordable housing.
I'll just add one sentence, and that is, you know what the right thing is.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to display one moment of political courage for that yes vote. And it's done. It will get created.
Well, let's give this panel of mayors a hand for California. I'll just say to my league, the executive director of the California League of California Cities, you got some great mayors here in California. Dealing with tough issues, and the diversity of California is reflected by the views and the ideas, which is great. I'd like to thank my team from the National League of Cities staff, who did a really good job of picking some wonderful mayors and putting together. NLC University is just your opportunity to learn. And I often say the easy part is getting elected. The difficult part is governing. And our citizens throughout America deserve the brightest and best people who are sharing and learning about what's going on that they can take back to their communities. And that's what our goal and mission is at the National League of Cities. So thank you all for the next 2 days of giving yourself your time and investing in learning, because through learning and sharing and growing, that's when our cities will be even more inclusive and better off because of your leadership and ideas. Join us at a reception that we're having right after here at the lobby level, the Palm Court, and enjoy the next 2 days and get to know some folks that you don't know. Don't hang around. All the Georgia people sit together. They never sit with any Florida people, we kind of get out, and we touch base. But have a good evening and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.